Here's something that doesn't make sense. The Vikings were some of the strongest, most resilient people in human history. They sailed across the Atlantic in wooden boats. They survived brutal Scandinavian winters. They raided, traded, and explored for centuries. And their primary sweetener was honey. They consumed it regularly, in massive quantities. Yet diabetes was virtually non-existent. Fast forward to today, we have an obesity epidemic. Type 2 diabetes is everywhere. Heart disease is the leading cause of death. And what's one of the main culprits? Sugar. The same chemical compound that's in honey, fructose and glucose. So, what's the difference? Why did honey fuel Viking warriors while modern sugar is destroying our health? The answer is going to completely change how you think about sweetness. Let's start with what Viking honey actually was. We're not talking about that golden liquid in a plastic bear bottle at the grocery store. Viking honey was raw, unprocessed, unpasteurized, and came from bees that were foraging on wildflowers, herbs, and plants across pristine Scandinavian landscapes. No pesticides, no monoculture farming, just pure biodiversity. The bees were collecting nectar from hundreds of different plant species: heather, clover, wildflowers, medicinal herbs. Each type of flower contributed different compounds to the honey, different enzymes, different antioxidants, different medicinal properties. The result was honey that varied from region to region, season to season, but was always nutritionally dense and alive with beneficial compounds. When those bees returned to their hives, they would regurgitate the nectar and add their own enzymes to it: invertase, diastase, glucose oxidase. These enzymes break down complex sugars and create hydrogen peroxide, which acts as a natural preservative and antimicrobial agent. Then the bees would fan the nectar with their wings for days, evaporating the water content until it reached about 17 to 18% moisture. At that point, the honey was shelf-stable. It could last for years, even centuries. Archaeologists have found perfectly preserved honey in ancient Egyptian tombs. The Vikings stored their honey in wooden barrels or clay pots, and it never went bad. But here's what matters for your health. Raw honey isn't just sugar. Yes, it contains fructose and glucose, but it also contains over 200 other compounds: enzymes that help you digest the sugars, antioxidants that fight inflammation, vitamins like B6, thiamine, niacin, riboflavin, minerals like calcium, copper, iron, magnesium, manganese, phosphorus, potassium, sodium, zinc, amino acids, organic acids, phenolic compounds, flavonoids. The bees essentially created a complete nutritional package wrapped around the sweetness. Your body doesn't process raw honey the same way it processes pure sugar, because all those additional compounds change how the sugars are absorbed and metabolized. Studies have shown that raw honey has a lower glycemic index than table sugar. It doesn't spike your blood sugar as dramatically because the enzymes and other compounds slow down digestion and absorption. The fructose in honey is also bound up with these other nutrients in a way that prevents it from overwhelming your liver the way high fructose corn syrup does. When Vikings ate honey, they were getting sustained energy without the metabolic chaos that comes from refined sugar. Now let's talk about how Vikings actually consumed honey. They didn't eat it the way we eat sugar today. They weren't having honey 20 times a day in hidden forms. Vikings used honey as a special food. They made mead, the fermented honey drink that was reserved for celebrations, rituals, and feasts. They used honey to preserve fruits and meats. They mixed it with herbs for medicinal purposes. A spoonful of honey might be eaten for quick energy before battle or during long journeys, but it wasn't an everyday constant like sugar is now. When they did consume it, it was pure and unprocessed, often mixed with other foods that balanced its effects. Mead is particularly interesting because fermentation transforms honey even further. The wild yeasts and bacteria that ferment the honey break down the sugars and create beneficial compounds like probiotics. The alcohol content is relatively low compared to modern spirits, usually around 5 to 15%. Vikings would drink mead socially, in a communal setting, often with food. This meant the honey sugars were absorbed slowly, buffered by the fats and proteins from whatever meal they were eating. Compare that to how we consume sugar today, in isolation, constantly, without any nutritional context. Let's contrast this with modern sugar. White table sugar, sucrose, is extracted from sugarcane or sugar beets through an intensive industrial process. The plants are harvested and crushed. The juice is extracted, filtered, and heated. Chemicals like sulfur dioxide and phosphoric acid are added to clarify it. It's crystallized, centrifuged, and refined until you're left with pure white crystals of sucrose. Every vitamin, mineral, enzyme, and beneficial compound has been stripped away. What remains is a pure chemical. 50% glucose, 50% fructose, bound together. That's it. No nutritional value whatsoever. Just empty calories that your body has to process without any of the cofactors that would normally help. When you eat refined sugar, your blood glucose spikes rapidly. Your pancreas has to dump insulin into your bloodstream to deal with it. If this happens occasionally, your body can handle it. But modern Americans are consuming sugar constantly. It's in bread, pasta sauce, salad dressing, crackers, yogurt, granola bars, ketchup, soup, bacon, everything. The average American consumes over 70 pounds of added sugar per year. Some estimates go as high as 150 pounds when you include high fructose corn syrup and other sweeteners. Your body wasn't designed for this. Your pancreas is in a constant state of emergency, pumping out insulin all day long. Eventually, your cells become resistant to insulin. Your blood sugar stays elevated. You develop metabolic syndrome, then prediabetes, then type 2 diabetes. The fructose in refined sugar is particularly damaging because it's metabolized exclusively by your liver. In small amounts from whole fruit, this is fine, but when you're consuming massive amounts of pure fructose from table sugar, or especially high fructose corn syrup, your liver gets overwhelmed. It starts converting that fructose into fat through a process called de novo lipogenesis. This fat accumulates in your liver, leading to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. It also gets released into your bloodstream as triglycerides, contributing to heart disease. The fructose also doesn't trigger satiety hormones the way glucose does, so you keep eating without feeling full. Here's something most people don't know. Sugar is actually addictive. Studies on rats have shown that sugar activates the same reward pathways in the brain as cocaine. It triggers dopamine release. When you eat sugar regularly, your brain starts craving that dopamine hit. You develop tolerance, needing more sugar to get the same pleasure response. You experience withdrawal when you try to quit. This is why people say they have a sweet tooth or they're sugar addicts. It's not a joke. It's neurochemistry. The food industry knows this. They engineer products to hit what they call the bliss point, the perfect ratio of sugar, fat, and salt that makes you want to keep eating. Vikings didn't have this problem because honey, especially in the quantities they consumed it, doesn't create the same addictive response. The complex matrix of compounds in raw honey modulates how your brain responds to the sweetness. You feel satisfied with less. There's no crash afterward that makes you crave more. It's nourishing rather than depleting. Let's also talk about what else Vikings were eating alongside their honey. Their diet was based on whole foods. Fish, particularly fatty fish like salmon, herring, and mackerel, loaded with omega-3 fatty acids. Wild game meat, organ meats, butter and fermented dairy products, root vegetables like turnips, onions, and carrots, cabbage and other cruciferous vegetables, berries, nuts, rye and barley prepared through soaking and fermentation. Every single thing they ate was nutrient-dense and unprocessed. When honey was part of a meal or celebration, it was balanced by all these other foods. The fats slowed sugar absorption. The proteins stabilized blood sugar. The fiber fed beneficial gut bacteria. Everything worked together. Compare that to the standard American diet. Breakfast is cereal with skim milk, both loaded with sugar. Mid-morning snack is a granola bar, more sugar. Lunch is a sandwich on white bread with a soda. Afternoon snack is cookies or chips. Dinner is pasta with store-bought sauce that has added sugar, maybe some garlic bread. Dessert is ice cream. Every single meal and snack is dominated by refined carbohydrates and added sugars. There's no nutritional foundation, no healthy fats to slow absorption, no fermented foods to support your gut, no vegetables to provide fiber and micronutrients. Your body is in a constant state of metabolic stress. Vikings also lived a lifestyle that made honey consumption less problematic. They were extraordinarily active, rowing boats for hours, hauling cargo, building settlements, fighting, farming, hunting. Their physical activity levels were through the roof. When you're that active, your muscles are constantly demanding glucose for energy. Any sugar you consume gets burned immediately rather than stored as fat. Your insulin sensitivity stays high because your muscles are always pulling glucose out of your bloodstream. The same amount of honey that would cause metabolic problems in a sedentary modern person was easily handled by a Viking warrior who was burning thousands of calories a day. There's also the seasonal aspect. Vikings lived in Scandinavia where winters were long and harsh. Food scarcity was real. There were times of the year when honey wasn't available at all. This natural fasting and feast cycle gave their bodies time to recover. Insulin levels would drop during winter when food was scarce. Their bodies would become extremely insulin sensitive. When honey became available again in warmer months, their metabolism could handle it efficiently. Modern humans have no such cycle. Food is available 24/7. We never give our bodies a break. Let's talk about what's in modern processed foods that makes sugar even more dangerous. High fructose corn syrup is the big one. It was introduced in the 1970s as a cheap alternative to sugar. It's made by taking cornstarch and treating it with enzymes to convert glucose into fructose, creating a syrup that's typically 55% fructose and 45% glucose. Food manufacturers loved it because it's liquid, so it mixes easily into products. It's cheaper than sugar, and it's sweeter, so you can use less of it. But here's the problem. The fructose and glucose in high fructose corn syrup are not bound together like they are in sucrose. They're free molecules. This means they hit your system even faster and harder than regular sugar. Your liver gets absolutely slammed with fructose. The metabolic consequences are worse than table sugar, and that's saying something. High fructose corn syrup is now in everything. Soda, obviously, but also bread, yogurt, salad dressing, ketchup, barbecue sauce, crackers, canned fruit, juice, energy drinks, sports drinks, cereal, granola bars. If it comes in a package and has a long shelf life, there's a good chance it contains high fructose corn syrup. Americans are consuming this stuff in quantities that would have been unimaginable even 50 years ago, and the diabetes rates track perfectly with the introduction and proliferation of high fructose corn syrup. There's also the issue of how sugar interacts with other modern processed ingredients. When you combine sugar with industrial seed oils, trans fats, artificial flavors, preservatives, and chemical additives, you create a perfect storm of metabolic dysfunction. The sugar spikes your insulin. The industrial oils cause inflammation. The additives disrupt your gut bacteria. Everything compounds. Vikings never dealt with this toxic combination because their food was simple and whole. Another factor nobody talks about is stress. Vikings had acute stress, a battle, a storm at sea, intense but temporary. Modern humans have chronic stress, financial worries, job pressure, traffic, social media, news cycle. This constant low-grade stress keeps cortisol elevated. Cortisol raises blood sugar and promotes insulin resistance. When you combine chronic stress with high sugar consumption, you accelerate the path to diabetes. Vikings had intense moments of stress, but also long periods of relative calm. They weren't in a constant state of fight or flight like modern people often are. The quality of modern honey has also been destroyed. Most honey you buy in stores isn't even real honey. It's been ultra-filtered to remove pollen, which strips away many of the beneficial compounds and makes it impossible to trace the honey's origin. Many products labeled as honey have been cut with high fructose corn syrup or rice syrup. Some studies have found that up to 76% of honey in U.S. grocery stores has been ultra-filtered. Real raw honey should be cloudy, should crystallize over time, and should contain visible pollen and tiny bits of wax. The clear, perfectly liquid honey in a plastic bear? That's been processed to death. Even if it's technically pure honey, the heating and filtering have destroyed the enzymes and many of the beneficial compounds. You're left with something closer to sugar syrup than the raw honey Vikings consumed. There's also the issue of how modern bees are kept. Commercial honey production involves bees that are fed sugar water when nectar isn't available. They're kept in monoculture environments, often near massive fields of a single crop. They're exposed to pesticides. They're transported on trucks to different locations for pollination services. All of this stress affects the quality of the honey they produce. The honey lacks the diversity of compounds that comes from bees foraging freely on wild plants. It's nutritionally inferior, even if it's technically real honey. So, what do we take from all this? First, understand that not all sweetness is the same. The chemical formula might be similar, but the context matters enormously. Raw honey in the context of a whole food diet Physical activity and moderate consumption is completely different from refined sugar consumed constantly in massive amounts alongside processed foods. Second, if you're going to consume sweeteners, raw, unfiltered honey from local sources is vastly superior to any form of refined sugar. Look for honey that's cloudy, from a specific region, and hasn't been heated above beehive temperature. Third, reduce your overall sugar consumption dramatically. Read labels, cook your own food, avoid processed products. Your body will thank you. Fourth, recognize that you can't out-eat a bad lifestyle with good food. Vikings could handle honey because of how they lived. If you're sedentary, stressed, and not sleeping well, even raw honey can be problematic in large amounts. Movement matters. Sleep matters. Stress management matters. Everything is connected. And finally, understand that we've been lied to about nutrition for decades. The food industry has convinced us that sugar is fine in moderation, that all calories are equal, that you just need willpower. None of that is true. Sugar is toxic in the amounts we're consuming. It's addictive, and it's destroying public health. But you have a choice. You can eat the way your ancestors ate, whole foods, minimal processing. Real honey if you want sweetness, and you can move your body the way humans were designed to move. It's not complicated, but it requires rejecting the modern food system and getting back to basics. The Vikings figured this out 1,000 years ago. Maybe it's time we learned from them.